Hi, I'm here at InfoSec 2024 with Haydn Brooks from Risk Ledger. Hi, Haydn. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me.
Hey, thank you, Chris, for interviewing me.
First and foremost, what is it you do here and why is it so important? And what
Yes,
do you
I'm
do
the
well?
CEO and co-founder of Risk Ledger. So we're a supply chain security company that approaches the supply chain problem in a slightly different way to the traditional status quo. So the idea is it's based on this social network platform. It's all about collaboration rather than auditing. So we help each client essentially run risk assessments against their suppliers. We then help the suppliers portray their security back to other clients. And because it's like a social network with relationships, we can then map out the supply chain and see who's reviewing who. And then off the back of that, we can open up all these new capabilities in the supply chain around detection and response of attacks.
That is really cool. So presumably you can identify kind of bottlenecks in supply chains that otherwise might not have been feasible from a classic way of doing that.
So depending on what industry you're in, they're called systemic risk or concentration risk. But
Yes.
a good example of that is we had a client where they were purchasing a reagent to use within their business. It was quite a critical reagent for the type of business they were. And they diversified it across 3 suppliers so that if one failed, they had another 2 that they could source the reagent from.
Yeah.
Through our platform, we were able to show that those 3 suppliers used the same 4th party to provide the reagent to all 3, so they'd push that bottleneck essentially one tier down the supply chain. And so we're able to spot things like that, help them come up with kind of plan Bs and different ways of solving those bottlenecks and those risks.
Now that's really, really important. I think that third-party risk is becoming, it's always been important. There's never been a time where you shouldn't have been paying attention to those kind of things. But I think SolarWinds really kicks off kind of an elevated awareness of those things. And it's great that there's a company taking a new and clever approach to this.
The hypothesis, especially with SolarWinds, was that reviews are good and managing and understanding the risk of your immediate third parties is important. But at the end of the day, you can review a supplier to death, and there's not really much correlation between the performance of them in a review and actually the effectiveness of their controls. And that's because you're reviewing their second line risk function, and actually all the controls typically sit on the first line, and that's usually where you find a control kind of breaks down. So our hypothesis was that we can do that risk management better than anyone else, but alongside that, we can then open up these new capabilities of when something goes wrong, we can see the blast radius of that problem, and then we can kind of help the entire network of companies on our platform react to that in a way that then mitigates that impact on everyone. So trying to move away from prevention and risk management and doing that, not moving away from it, but doing it very well, but also introducing these other capabilities around detection and response.
That certainly is very impressive. As far as these things are concerned, though, what are some of the greatest risks in information security that you see today? Outside of supply chain risk, which of course you're going to say supply chain risk, of course, but
supply chain's always been there. It's definitely ballooned over the past 20 years with the number of suppliers that people use and the openness to businesses to outsource more, and they're more comfortable outsourcing more critical parts of their business to suppliers. Outside of that, I'd say it really is the fundamentals. So patch management is still a massive risk. There are a lot of companies, or my interpretation of the patch management problem is that you're relying on IT having solid data of what you need to patch. And so there's maybe some more foundational problems in other areas of the business that needs to be solved before security can really operate as effectively as it should.
I think there's some communication risks in there as well with patch management too, is that a lot of IT people are fearful of applying patches because there's this notion that it's going to break production.
Yeah.
And then they get in trouble from the business. So they're like, actually, given a choice between something that is working and something that is potentially not working, they take the working. And that is your classic IT approach. If it's up, then it's fine, which isn't necessarily the secure approach, right?
One of the interesting things about being a founder of a company is your view on risk management completely changes. So like being a practitioner in the industry to begin with, it was very much about like reducing the risk as much as we could and trying to prevent breaches from happening. Now being kind of an owner of a company, you start to understand that risk management is about reducing the risk to an acceptable level and that you need to be able to take risks for the business to operate. And that kind of is a nice parallel to that patch management problem where actually we do need systems to be working. And so we want to reduce the risk of incidents, but then we also don't want to cause them by patching something that the rest of the estate isn't ready to be patched.
Absolutely. I've heard it said that actually there isn't such a thing as information security risk or cybersecurity risk. There's only business risk, and of which those are subsets thereof. Which is,
I completely agree with that,
a topic du jour is kind of ransomware, which is everybody's discussing it, and various governments are talking about outlawing the payments of ransomware. Realistic proposition, in your opinion?
Big question. So, I mean, the key thing for ransomware for me is that it wasn't really an innovation in any sort of malware, but it was more about the business model that came with it. And it was an innovation in kind of the business model that malicious actors use. Preventing people from paying the ransoms, I think that has a lot of pros to it, but at the same time, I do know some companies that paid their ransoms and that did for them solve the problem, the immediate problem they basically had. They got their data back and it was fine. So yeah, I wouldn't want to comment on that one without taking a lot more thought over it.
No, absolutely. And I think it's very easy to have a firm opinion in a vacuum.
Yeah, exactly.
With
Yeah.
issues like this,
When you're in a crisis and all your systems
Absolutely.
are locked up, it's a completely different matter.
On one side, or obviously, giving money to criminals,
Yeah.
boo, wrong. However, tanking a business that maybe you and your family have spent generations building, that if you don't pay the ransom and get your data back, you're going to go out of business.
Yeah.
Also wrong. Hobson's choice in a lot of ways, and an unfair question on my part.
I was going to say it was a tough one. You said this would be easy.
No, that's fine. Let's move to something a little bit more fun and juicy. Insider threat investigation. So,
Cool.
It's the old 1-2 punch, ransomware,
Yeah.
insider threat. So, obviously, there's a balance really between being creepy and spying on your employees as a business owner and having robust security inside your company. How do you, as the CEO of a company, feel? How do you set that balance?
Yeah, good question. My security manager would be very nervous about me answering this on camera. So for me, you need to be able to trust your employees. And the problem with insider threats is that essentially it's people who are abusing that trust. And without that trust, they can't operate. And so you do have to give them that trust, but then they go and abuse it and do malicious things. For us, there's some more like foundational principles that I think do mitigate that risk somewhat. So things like segregation of duties and bits and pieces like that, which mean like you're not relying on one person to do or make some big decision that then could put the entire business at risk.
Yes.
So there's some more foundational principles that I think we follow quite closely to kind of mitigate that risk as much as we can.
Absolutely. So, and to make you feel not as exposed as you might be, I'll share mine as well.
Please do.
And I think, for us, exactly the same as you, the policies and processes need to be in that, least privilege, separation of duty, but also guardrails and education around users as well. Because, you mentioned, so insider threat could be malicious, could be accidental
I was
as well.
For the accidental ones, that works, For the malicious ones, it's a bit more interesting, I think.
Malicious ones makes it a whole lot easier to investigate as well, because, they've been told, and there's guardrails, almost like those bumper things. And so, you go to the Temp and bowling and the bumper alleys, so the ball doesn't go in the gutter, the data ball doesn't go in the gutter or whatever. And I think that's something that we operate on.
Also makes it easier when they do something because it means they have like explicitly gone against those guardrails, so it's a bit easier to prove, I would have thought, in an investigation.
Exactly, and a lot easier to call out as opposed to, is that not the correct way to share data?
Exactly.
But no, it's certainly been...
That was always, I always had a question on DLP, which was a good question to you actually.
Yeah, shoot.
So growing up, I did a lot of DLP implementation as a consultant, and I was always under the impression that DLP implementation really only worked to stop accidental leaks of data. If someone maliciously wanted to exfiltrate data out of a company that was using DLP, it was fairly easy to do.
Yeah, you just figure out what the rules are, what regexes they're matching on, and then don't use those.
But then it's almost like the cost of the DLP solution and the team then to manage the alerts from it. How does that weigh up against just doubling down on kind of security awareness and training and trying to reduce the accidental loss through other means rather than using DLP? It was always my question. It was an interesting ROI kind of comparison.
No, that is a really good question. And if you are implementing the DLP in that classic sense of rules-based blocking and that, you're absolutely right. It doesn't work necessarily all that well against malicious actors. Or, let me rephrase, for it to work effectively enough in those circumstances, you need to impede the business of the rest of the legitimate business users so much that they become so frustrated that oftentimes people just either switch it off or they fall back to shadow IT, and you're actually pushing people into the malicious camp that wouldn't ordinarily be there. I've been there myself. I used to work at a bank, and I try and send something off to the auditor, and the DLP solution would block it, say this is sensitive data, and I'm like, I know it is. I've been told to send it. This is not the right way, and I'm asking myself, what is the right way? I don't know. So, something that we do, as I mentioned, we kind of have these guardrails of education and training built into a DLP solution. So you spot these things not by implementing hard and fast blocking rules, but by taking the first step. Like the SANS Institute say, to identify evil, understand what normal looks like. So we see all data movement and all data access happening.
So the rules aren't hard-coded,
and we spot deviations.
You
There
can see
are hard-coded
anomalies
rules. So if you want a bumper somewhere, you can put that, but we see more as guardrails rather than gates. You can go, there are some things that are universally not right. You have a policy to say we do not use one cloud sharing data service. Then you can block that entirely. Great, that's perfect. But also, if you want to understand there's higher volumes of data moving in this way, somebody's doing something odd, then we've kind of incorporated that insider risk detection into data loss prevention as well. Because, as you say, if they're a malicious insider, it's an insider risk problem, not a data loss. Data loss prevention is the tool. Insider risk is the problem. if you see what I mean.
It's quite nice. Yeah, yeah. That's actually quite a nice way of doing DLP. Yeah.
Yeah, we think so.
That was my tough question to the CISO of a DLP company. Anyway.
Well, how did I do?
Yeah, pretty well. Pretty well.
Thanks very much. Oh, well, it's been absolutely awesome chatting
Always
to
a
you.
pleasure,
As
Chris.
ever.
Yeah.
It is always a pleasure, and I wish you a very successful show.
Thank you.